Shalom and welcome everyone to Messianic Delaware. My name is Jerry Mitchell. I am just one of the many teachers we have here at Messianic Delaware, and I want to take just a minute to say how absolutely thrilled I am to be part of this group and to be counted with them. Uh, I could brag on this group, but I won't. But I will brag on our Creator for bringing us together and for showing us the things He has shown us, for giving us the opportunities He's given to us, and just for being able to bring the word to you. One of our folks, Miss Pam, just got back from Saudi Arabia visiting the real Mount Sinai, and you can look forward to having her uh, in pictures, and hopefully I'll get a chance to have her record her experience at Mount Sinai as well. That should be absolutely thrilling for you folks, and please, please, please stay tuned for that. But for right now, we're going to continue looking at separating fact from fiction in Revelation, but we need to figure out what we missed in Genesis. And when I was putting this together, I realized something about Genesis. And I have to go back. I can't not go back and explain this to you, okay? We missed this because if we look in Genesis, way back in Genesis chapter 1, now I know Revelation's at the other end of the book, but we're going to go all the way back to chapter 1 of Genesis. The Almighty is almost through with creation. He gets to day 6 and he says, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle and all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that crawls on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So God makes two. Okay, we all get the story later on in Genesis chapter 2, right? He makes Adam and realizes Adam needs a partner. Well, that was the plan all along, because watch what happens in the very next verse of Genesis chapter 1. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. That's important. Replenish there is really not a good word. Okay, it means to fill the earth, fill it up, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the earth. Okay, every tree which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. For you it shall be meat. Now, we were actually originally designed to be vegetarian. That was back when we were going to live in the garden, in this paradise, right? And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and everything that creepeth upon it, everything was designed to eat vegetation. Even lions, even Tyrannosaurus rex, all of it was designed to be something other than what it is thought of today. All right? Now, if we think of this, let's be careful and not read over it, but look at it and see what it has to say. God's going to create man in his image. Now, that doesn't mean we necessarily look exactly like God, okay? Because Hebrew is an active language, that means our actions are to reflect the actions of God. We cannot necessarily create as God creates, but what we can do is have the characteristics of God. But we have something given to us that they don't even have in heaven. We have this command to be fruitful and multiply. God breathes into us the breath of life. He gives us free will. And then he says, be fruitful and multiply. What he has given to man, okay, is the ability to create through reproduction. Make little images of ourselves, so to speak. And in making those little images of ourselves, we are to fill the earth and care for it. All right? So bear that in mind. We are to be fruitful. We are to fill the earth. We're to raise families, have children. But what goes along with having children? We learn later in Deuteronomy that we are supposed to teach them to teach their children, to teach their children, to teach their children, and so on and so on and so on forever, that our Creator designed us this way. Now, let's look at chapter 2. And I'm not going to read all this because I know this is going to be a longer teaching. I've got a lot of explaining to do. But in chapter 2, we look in there and we see some more talk about what's going to be given, right? And then we look and we see, well, wait a minute, God took man and put him in a garden. Well, that's kind of odd because what he lays out there in the previous verses really reflects the entire earth. And so we look at that entire earth reflection and we say, well, God's given man the earth, right? So we look at this. I'm going to suggest to you here, that man's duties were to be obedient, care for the garden and earth. Okay? It is one of the parts of what is a covenant arrangement. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But let's think about this. God said, right, you're going to take care of my earth. You're the caretakers. By the way, we're going to have a contract or a covenant. All right, you can almost think of a covenant as a contract. You'll see more in this in a second. But your part of this is to care for the earth, everything. You care for the animals, you care for the trees, you care for the grass, you care for it all. And when we think of this as a covenant agreement, is it any wonder that Cain's laziness and lack of desire to please the Creator was found unfavorable? One of the things that we were designed to do that Abel was actually doing and bringing the best of the best, Cain just threw some stuff together. He was lazy, he was lackadaisical, he was complacent, and he didn't care. We're going to see this a little bit more in a moment. But I want you to understand, this is a covenant agreement made with Adam and all of Adam's descendants, of which we are one. Okay, each one of us is a descendant of Adam. So let's look at what a covenant actually is. A covenant is really composed of three parts. You have an agreement, which means that the parties must agree to be in a covenantal relationship. All right? And everybody really, you'll see in a second, does this. There is an arrangement, which means that the parties have to agree on the terms of the covenant. Now, in the terms of the covenant in Genesis between Adam and God, God says, I'm giving you all of this, right? And you're going to take care of it. But that's not the only one. Because part of what we're supposed to do is be fruitful and multiply. Now, some of us are very good at that. I say kind of sarcastically, but think about this. Be fruitful and multiply. You are supposed to continue to procreate, to reproduce, to do the things that the Almighty has done for you. Okay? You are to keep it going. He creates us in His image. By our physical reproduction, we create little 3D images of ourselves. Okay? So that is part of the arrangement. What must happen? The other thing is we have a confirmation. Each party must display an action that displays, they confirm the covenant. By Adam going into the garden, and by Adam and Eve caring for the garden, dressing the garden, making sure everything was taken care of, even through their children and Abel, who was really dedicated to that. And they had more than just the three that are mentioned. It says that they had many, right? They had other sons and daughters, and that's where everybody comes from. Don't get freaked out by that. It's in there. They all do this thing. They all care for the garden. They're working. But then something happens that I don't have time to get into. I don't, but you'll see where this comes. You'll see where I'm going with this. Trust me. Trust me. We can say that we were designed to live in a covenant relationship with our Creator. Don't let that freak you out. We are absolutely designed to live in a covenantal relationship with our Creator. It means He gives us things to do. We are to do that. And in His side, He's going to take care of us. He's going to make sure that we have what we need to live. And I don't necessarily mean live in a great big mansion on this earth. All right? He's going to take care of us. And you're going to see that He takes care of us in such a way that it is really amazing. And I don't know how we missed this, but we missed it. So important is this concept of covenant. If we look in the Hebrew, you're going to find the word covenant comes from the Strong's 1285. Okay, it's berit, which really is connected to the very first word in the Bible in Hebrew. Okay? And it's bereshit, in the beginning. Be here is simply a preposition. It says in, and then reshit, meaning the beginning, meaning the chief, meaning the head. But when you put these words together, they form a concept. They contain similar letters, and it reminds us of concepts and ideas. This is not the only one, okay? Habits and feet are another one. In English, we could think of maybe the best one I could think of is present and presence, okay? So you have been in the presence in some way of someone, okay? And they give you something, a present. Very similar words, similar letters, similar kind of concept type thing, okay? But in English, it really doesn't work as well as it does in Hebrew because, well, people thought up English, God thought up Hebrew, so it works in His language a whole lot better than it works in ours. But you see this concept coming together where word associations, letter associations do things, okay? This is important. You're going to see this again in a few minutes. Now, the penalty for violating a covenant is dependent on the terms outlined in the arrangement, just like a contract. If you have a breach of contract, then there is a penalty, but the penalty for violating a covenant is much more severe, okay? Because the penalty for violating a covenant deals with our spirit. Now, we could use an example as of a threshold covenant here. Many people are familiar with the term blood covenant. Not as many people are familiar with the term threshold covenant, but we use it all the time. If you go knock on somebody's door, they open the door and invite you in, or they might not invite you in. If they invite you in, you have now entered into a threshold covenant. Yes, you have. Trust me on this. You walk into their home, they have invited you in, you have walked in, you now have agreed to be in a covenantal relationship. The terms or the arrangement of that covenant is they bring you in and they will take care of you while you are in their house, all right? But your actions must be to respect the rules of their house when you come in, which means you can't go in and force your will onto them while you're in their house. This is important because eventually we're going to be going to the Almighty's house, right? That New Jerusalem. We cannot force our way into His house because it's a covenantal relationship. We have to go on His terms. We don't get to go on ours. All right? Hopefully you understand that the penalty. Now, if you violate a threshold covenant, you get kicked out, or you don't get to come in at all, right? There's Trust me, there's people who you don't want in your house. I've been in sales. I've knocked on doors. I'm here for so and so. They sent us a note saying that they were interested in hearing what we have to say. And maybe somebody else in the house says, no, 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 we don't want you here. So they close the door. You go to your next appointment. That's the way a threshold covenant works. Okay? It's the same way when the Almighty says, I would really like it if you'd come into my house, but you have to live by my rules. Okay? That's what it is. Now, why is this critical need to know information to understand Revelation? Oh my. Oh my. When we know Revelation is about repentance and getting back to the covenant, it is absolutely crucial that we understand what a covenant is, and we understand that Adam has this, or developed this covenantal relationship, not just for Adam and Eve, but for all of humanity. Because we are all descendants of Adam, we all have this responsibility to live in this covenantal relationship with God. And we can reject it. We can reject it, just like if you don't agree to live by the rules of someone's house or while you're there, you should leave. And they would probably ask you to leave. Let's say you go to someone's house and, a good example, we were just there the other day. Friends of ours, when you go into their house, you take your shoes off because that is the way they live. And that's absolutely fine. They can do that. Don't have a problem with that. Didn't realize it when I first walked in, but there it is. And we said, okay, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. It's your house. Do whatever you want. I would expect most grown people, okay, if they go to someone's house and they're actually invited in, chances are the first thing you're not going to do is jump up on a piece of furniture and start pretending it's a trampoline, right? That would not be conducive to the rules of someone's house. Now, if it is, that's great. That's fine. If you take that a little bit farther, if you go to maybe an amusement park, okay, you agree to abide by the rules of their establishment. That's a threshold covenant. Okay, it all works together. That's why this is so critical, that we have to understand this. Now, God provides us with a way to return to that relationship with Him. He says, I'm going to give you every opportunity to come back. And you know what? Even built into Revelation, because Revelation is not John's revelation. He's explaining it, but it is actually the revelation of Yeshua. It's the revelation of Jesus. And everything he taught while he was on earth is about repentance. Okay? It's all about repentance. And Revelation is really nothing more than a series of clues that teaches us how to repent and how to get to that next step, which is restoration. Think about that. Okay, now I know I left off in the last time in chapter 3, but I'm going to skip chapter 4 because I don't have time to go into it. This is going to be long anyway. And in chapter 4, it's John's vision of the throne room. You can look at Ezekiel chapter 1, Ezekiel chapter 10. The only difference is going to be the 24 elders, okay? Now, let's look at something here. Revelation chapter 5:1. John writes, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, which means a scroll. There it is, the Greek Strong's 975. And it's written inside and outside, but it has 7 seals. It has 7 seals. Why is this important? This scroll is most often referred to as the title deed to the earth. That's interesting, isn't it? It's the title deed to the earth. That's kind of crazy. The Almighty, it is said, because of this, and because of his covenant agreement with Adam, that he gave to Adam the title deed to the earth. But when Satan convinced Eve to rebel, He then stole this title deed of the earth from them and sealed it with 7 seals. Let's think about that. Psalm 24:1 reads that the earth and everything in it belong to, and you read that in Hebrew, it says Yehovah. The world and all its people belong to him. So God owns creation. You know, heaven and earth are going to be destroyed, right? Now, let's think about if this is right, and we'll give it the benefit of the doubt for a second. If that scroll in the hand of the Almighty is the title deed to the earth, and Satan has stolen it by convincing Adam and Eve to rebel against God, it's kind of like Satan changed the locks on a house that somebody else built. And God's about ready to burn down the house because somebody changed the locks. Let me ask you this. Knowing what we know now, does this still fit the narration? Does this fit the narration? Let's keep looking. Let's keep looking. Let's keep digging, because there's something we need to see. And we need to remember this covenantal relationship between Adam and therefore all of humanity and our Creator. If we look in Isaiah 49, verse 2, it reads, "He has made my mouth like a sharp sword. While hiding me in the shadow of his hand, he has made me like a sharpened arrow, while concealing me in his quiver." Well, that's kind of odd. He's hiding me in the shadow of his hand. How about Isaiah 49:16? "Behold, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me." See, the scroll in his hand must be so important. God not only holds onto it, but he looks at it continually. What I'm about to lay out is something so obscure, okay? You probably have never heard it before. But bear with me. This is going to be amazing. Now, the word for seal, okay, is chatam. The word for wall is chumah. If you look at those words, they contain the same type of letters, right? They both contain the het, they both contain the mem. So they remind us of each other. See, a wall and a seal is something that separates. It separates two things. One we think of as being locked, you can't get in. The other is just a barrier. All right? But look at the word zel. Shadow can also be translated as shelter. Can mean shelter. I believe you find that in Genesis 19. It's shelter. When they talk about bringing someone under the shadow of their tent, they're bringing them under the shelter of their tent. Why is this important? Let's keep looking. Psalm 63:8, "My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me." If we look at upholds here, it's a terrible translation. It means to grasp, to support, to attain. If you look in the lexicon, to hold fast, to hold on to. Let's keep going because this gets better. Psalm 18:35. "You protect me with your saving shield. You support me with your right hand. You have stooped to make me great." Now, the word here for support, sa'ad. You know, David uses this before, but he doesn't use this word. In this particular one, it says, "With your right hand, you support me." Why is this important? In modern Hebrew, the first letter, the Samiach, is the only closed letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It used to be, back in the original Paleo-Hebrew, it used to resemble a fence post. Both of these things give us the idea that it is enclosed, it is protected, it is really something so important that you have to hold on to it. It has to be enclosed. It has to be encircled. It has to be almost sealed. It has to be so important to you, you're going to hold on to it. You're going to hold on to it with everything you've got because you don't want it getting away and you don't want anything hurting it. Are you ready? Are you ready for what I'm about to say? Some of you may be guessing at this already. The scroll in Revelation 5:1, I saw on the right hand of the one seated on the throne a scroll written on both sides, front and back, sealed with 7 seals. That scroll, guess what that scroll is? Oh my, that scroll is the book of life. It's not the title deed to the land. It's more important. The title deed to the land doesn't matter. It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be taken away. The scroll that is so important that the Almighty holds it in his right hand, continually looking at it. Your wall is before me in Isaiah 49:16. The separation between me and you, I'm always looking at. I'm looking at it. I'm concentrating on it. I've got to get it available from me to you once again. I've got to restore the covenant relationship I made with Adam. That he's going to take care of the earth, he's going to fill it up, and I'm going to take care of all of his descendants. The Almighty, this is so important to him. The earth, he's going to destroy. It's not a big deal. He makes it all over again. Us, we are the ones who are so important that he holds that book of life in his hand. We are the only ones with the authority to erase our own names from that scroll. Let me say that again. We are the only ones with the authority to erase our names from that scroll. It is so important. He holds it in his right hand. When I first discovered, I shouldn't say, when I myself first looked at this and discovered this, I thought, this is impossible. It can't be. And I searched for about 10 days every way I knew to search. And I only found one very obscure writing that alludes to this. And it was written by a group of Messianic rabbis in Washington State who basically discard it and say, well, there's no evidence that say that, well, let me rephrase that. There's no biblical evidence that places the book of life in the palm of God's hand. I think what I've just laid out is just some of the many witnesses we have that talks about God protecting us and holding us in his hand. Over and over and over again, we are told how important we are to God. We look in at the end of Revelation, and it says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and first earth have passed away. Isaiah tells us the things that were will no longer be remembered. We don't, the Almighty says we, as people, as images of him, are so important. He holds us in his hand. The earth he spoke into creation. And then he uses part of that creation to design our physical being. And he breathes into us the breath of life. And he tells Adam, you do the same thing. You make little images of you and fill the earth and take care of the earth. Adam blew it. What Satan has stolen, what our enemy has taken from us, okay? What the enemy has sealed from us is that that perfect relationship that Adam once enjoyed with his creator, walking in the garden, listening and hearing his voice, so plain, so crisp. What the enemy has taken and sealed is that relationship. And I'm not going to go into uh, the next couple of chapters here, but I want each of you to think about what you know of it. Because every time one of those seals is stripped, okay, it doesn't really reflect damage. Well, it may damage the earth in some way, but what it's really doing, the first seal that's stripped is a white horse that goes out to conquer. Well, what did Satan go out to conquer other than humanity? It was really a it was a wolf in sheep's clothing. It really truly was. It was this enemy of humanity going out to steal this book that had already been written, because when God spoke into creation 6,000 years ago, he spoke your name. And that name was written on this scroll. You are the only one that can erase it. That's how important this scroll is, that Satan, the enemy, was so determined to control it. Even Paul said we don't fight against flesh and blood. We fight against things that we can't always see. We fight against the seals that are separating us from our Creator. We fight against the things within us sometimes. Because Satan has absolutely given us doubt. Did God really say? And I want to give you the image that God sits on his throne, that not only John saw, but I honestly believe Ezekiel saw it too. Sitting on his throne, holding in his hand all of the names of humanity that are willing to say yes to him, that are so willing that their names will be found in his book of life. That's the image I want to give you, that God holds in his right hand your name. God holds in his right hand your name, and it is so important that he looks at that wall of separation all the time. And he's coming up with every way he can think of to get you to say, I want to be in that relationship. I want to live in that covenantal relationship that I was designed to live in. I want to be part of that. I want to be part of that. I have a desire to be part of it. Because if it's so important to the one who made you, it certainly should be important to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to stop right here, because the next time I continue with this, I'm going to pick up where I left off and hopefully be able to show you. This was a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's a rabbit trail you needed to hear, you needed to know, you need to understand, because the only way to understand Revelation, the only possible hope you have of understanding Revelation, is to understand that you were designed to be in a relationship with your Creator that is so important that he holds your name in his right hand, and he is the one who chooses you. But it's up to you to choose him and live the way you are designed to live. Until next time, Shalom.